Remember back in January of this year when, well, we had some pretty strong optimism about what was ahead. Stock market was doing great. We were reestablishing ourselves in the world economy. Many churches, won't say most, but many churches were in a growth phase. There were just a lot of positive and encouraging signs. I never would have. I don't think there are many prognosticators who would have or did project that by the middle of March, the bottom was going to fall out of everything. But it did. You know, that's kind of the nature of life, isn't it? Everything can look great, and then kaboom, the bottom falls out. During this epidemic or pandemic that the world's been basically paralyzed by, there are a lot of people who are projecting this is a sign, a dramatic, undeniable sign that we are in the last days, that Jesus is coming back, the tribulation is coming, and the world is coming to an end. I don't know that they're wrong, but I don't know that they're right. What I do know is nobody has ever known. Even Jesus said, I don't know. The angels don't know. Only the Father knows when I'm coming back. And because of that, there is this unstated kind of conclusion. You ought to act like and think like and behave like every day could be the day. Peter writes about that. We've been in 1 Peter chapter 4 for a while now, and we're going to be in it for a while longer. But in verse 7, he says, the end of all things is near. Well, bear in mind that when Peter wrote this in the mid-60s AD, not 1960s, 60s, he felt the end of the world, the end of all things, was near. I see, that's a hard thing for us. For a lot of us anyway. We read that and think, well, gosh, if you thought the end was near back then, man, will it ever come? Legitimate question. Very legitimate question. We're going to talk about it, but not right yet, because Peter talks about it. Well, what he says is, the end of all things is near. Therefore, be alert and of sober mind, because you'll need to be alert and sober mind in these difficult and trying times. Nope. Therefore, be alert and of sober mind, so that you may pray. That to me is poignant, and here's why. To be alert and sober-minded, it is required that we are alert and sober-minded if we are going to be able to address the issues that are going to happen in a complex, complicated world as history makes its way toward its end, whenever the end may be, today, tomorrow, or later. But the end will always be near. It's nearer now than it was when Peter wrote. And so we have to there are measures that we can take. Being sober and alert. But that's, as necessary as those things are, that's not the point Peter was making. So that you can pray. When you come down to, it may not be the only bottom line in life, but it is one significant bottom line. There are times when all you can do is pray. Listen, you're not going to end the pandemic. If your job is hanging by a thread, there are some things you can probably do that might influence the outcome, but you don't get to control it. If you've got an estranged family member, there are many things you could do that could perhaps facilitate a process of reconciliation, but you don't get to control that. You and I have so little control, it could almost be factored clear out of the picture. We're not going to fix very much in the world, honest to goodness. I grew up in the 60s and 70s where the whole line was, we can change the world. Well, it got to be the 80s and the 90s, and we realized, hey, we're not changing the world. That's too big of we're not going to be able to do that. So, this is just my generation. Let's make some money. Let's do what we can to make a good life. Well, I'm not accusing all baby boomers of that mentality, but I will say it generally pervades. Peter says, the end is near. So be alert and sober-minded because of that, so that you can pray. In my ministry and work, when I kind of moved out of youth ministry into family ministry after 17 years, and then I did 11 years of family ministry, which was very formative and very enriching for me personally, and I think for my family as well. But anyway, after that, I started into the phase of my career work that was mainly about counseling and teaching, which honestly, I'm wired for that. When this was an interesting experience in this very large church that my wife and I served in Las Vegas, Canyon Ridge Christian Church. It was a great experience for both of us. On Wednesday nights, they had a service, and early in the service, they had a prayer time, and they invited anyone who wanted specific prayer to come down, and the elders and a few of us on staff were there to pray with them and visit with them about their issue. Well, for about the first year and a half, I dreaded Wednesday night because I knew what was going to happen. The folks who were receiving these people with issues would go, that's a tough one. Well, I want you to see that guy right over there. So by the time that Wednesday night had ended, I had about 40 extra hours added to my week trying to deal with all these people. It was a burden that was too much for me because I already had about 50 hours of work that related to my job description, right? Well, all this was emotional. Nobody ever said, now you've got to meet with every one of these people. But it really was overwhelming for me. Well, one of the elders was golly, this guy was precious. Mike Haddle. I will always be grateful that Mike was in my life because God put him there. And he said, hey, you don't need to do this. He said, why don't you come to the elders meeting and explain what's going on? So I did. One of the things that I realized in getting ready to go to that elders meeting, think about this. Previous to about 1930 or 40, ministers and pastors, excuse me, my nose is giving me some problems this morning. Ministers and pastors, people went to them for advice and encouragement. But you know what they went to them the most for? Prayer. So I shared with the elders, if for most of 2,000 years, the best, most powerful thing any minister or elder or leader in a church has ever done is pray. And frankly, people made it. And they may have easily made it as well as they do today, and maybe better in a lot of ways. Well, why do we think that praying for these people is not enough. Now we need to add to that, they need to see somebody with counseling background, training, skills. I'm not saying counseling is unnecessary. All you need to do is pray. But what I am saying is, boy, we cannot afford to discount the power of prayer. Whatever issue you are facing in your life, the odds favor the idea that wise godly counsel could be very valuable. But nothing trumps prayer. I think we've lost sight of that sometimes. That me coming to you, not for counsel, not for advice, but just for prayer. That was the pattern in the New Testament church. The book of James talks about it. If anybody's sick, let them come to the elders who will anoint them with oil and pray for them. I'm not even saying you got to anoint people with oil, but what I am saying is the pattern was clear. You prayed for people because prayer works. There are 3 basic answers to every prayer. We have the assurance that God hears every prayer. And I believe that he answers every prayer in one of 3 ways. The first way is our most preferred way. He answers our prayer by saying yes and doing what we asked. There are other times, though, when he says no, and he does not do what we ask. I can look back over my life and realize that there are many of those times I'm grateful for, because had God given me what I asked for, it wouldn't have put me here where I am. It would have led me down another path that I don't think would have been so good. There are other times, honestly, I don't understand it. I just know that if he says no, then I got to learn to live with that and move on. And in reflection, the odds are I will eventually, I'll get it. I'll understand why there was no. But there's no guarantee that we're going to always understand why God says no. Sometimes he says no just for the only reason is he knows better than we do. And then a third answer is not yet. This is a very important prayer. I have one particular prayer that I've been praying for 3 years, and I hardly miss a day praying for it. Until I'm convinced that God has said no, I will keep praying that prayer, because I think the answer at this moment is not yet. And if he says no, I'll have to learn to live with it, and I will. But when the answer is not yet, what are we supposed to do? We keep asking, we keep seeking, we keep knocking. Jesus said, ask, seek, and knock, because those who ask, seek, and knock will get an answer. I am asking and seeking and knocking, and I will continue to do that. So, because the end is near, the end is coming. You know, the old joke is a guy stands on a street corner with a sign that says, the end is near. Well, it happens to be true. It's closer today than it was yesterday. And the end is near. So, therefore, be alert and sober-minded so that you can pray. What does alert and sober-minded look like? Well, alert has to do with pay attention. Don't get so tunnel visioned that you don't see anything but what you want and what your next thing is. And then sober-minded basically means you are being objective. We're going to talk more about what that looks like and how that applies, because these 2 things are huge in our world today with the panic and the paralyzation of this pandemic. We must be alert and sober-minded. And I want to talk about that next when we get together next time. Thanks for joining me. I hope we connect this way again with Soul Care with Stevie Boy.